Freedom Conference 2024. Today we're going to free the dome, free your dominion of your entire life. That's some etymology. Etymology is a root study of words. My name's Coach Matt. I've been working with Coach JD for about a year now. And I'm going to get into some details about who I am, and I get into some details about what I've studied over the last 10 years of my life, get into a little bit on my personal story, and also I'd like to actually start by sharing how JD and I even met up in the first place. So I had been studying a lot of scripture, mythology, etymology, a lot of different esoteric topics. Esoteric means a lot of the hidden, unseen information. And I promise I'm not going to melt your brains today or anything like that. It's going to be very, very easy, very digestible information. But the first thing I want to do, actually, I want to share my story with Coach JD. But let's give a round of applause to JD for setting some passion up. Absolutely. And the other thing is, I want you guys to give yourselves a round of applause too. Attitude of gratitude. That's so important for everybody. You guys are... Thank you. You guys are amazing people, seriously. I mean, I've just met so many wonderful faces over the last couple of days. So many wonderful faces I'm going to meet today and tomorrow. So if you guys want to come and have a conversation with me, feel free, because I love meeting new people. But how I met JD, it started about 2021. I was watching this guy on YouTube talk about cryptocurrency. Really, really interesting. I loved his mindset. I loved all of the energy that he brought to the table. And one of the big things that I realized while I was writing my book, I'm going to show you guys a bit of my book in a second. I was writing this big, huge book at the time because I had noticed there was this big energy shift. And I'll ask a question. How many of you guys felt a huge shift in your lives over the last 5 years? The last 5 years, since COVID, anything like that? That's what I figured. So I was writing this book because I was seeing these things happening in the world. I actually found out about COVID being the disease in 2019, and it was like November of 2019. I was reading all about it from China, and I said, I got to move, I got to get out of here, I got to start teaching this stuff to other people because this is going to be a huge, massive shift in the world. And so I started writing this book, and I'm going to show you guys a picture of it in a second. And it ended up being like over 1,000 pages. And when I went to the publisher, they said, yeah, we need you to cut that down to like 800. Can you do that? And I was like, okay. Because it was just this really thick book. And while I was writing the book, this is 2021, I was looking for quotes. I was quoting people like Seneca, Paracelsus, Aristotle, Socrates, a lot of people who have fundamentally changed human history and evolution. And I was struggling with trying to find better quotes. I wanted it to be really digestible, to use that word again, for anybody to be able to pick it up, of any generation, of any age, to be able to just read and flip through it. And so while I was Googling, I was trying to find quotes, and some of them were too long, they wouldn't fit on the page, and finally I get to, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning, I got my cup of coffee and I'm writing, and I see Coach JD's got a new video, and I click on it, and he goes, what you believe in your heart and what you think in your mind will eventually become your words and become your reality. And you know, the rest is history, because I said, holy shit, that's a great quote. I got to put that in my book. So he actually does have a quote in my book. And so what I did was, this was about, so give it up for him, because seriously, he's got a quote in my book alongside some of the greatest minds in human history. And I think that's exactly where we are today, reinventing everything that is going on fundamentally in society. We're going to talk about finances, we're going to talk about spirituality. But it was just one of those things where it was mind-opening, because I said, wow, it was so simple, but it was so easy. And it was a big inspiration for how I wanted my book to be understood by other people, because I didn't want to make it this big, dramatic thing and try to make it sound like I was really smart, because it's not about that. It's about having people understand the true grit of the wisdoms that all of the forefathers before us, all the foremothers before us came from before, and where we're going afterwards. And this is something that I share with JD a lot. We are responsible, each one of us, for every human life that came before us, the billions that have died, and we are responsible for every human life today, and we are responsible for every human life that comes after us. And you have to take that diligence and that temperance into your own personal accountability and self-responsibility. because we as a collective are all reflections of each other. We all feel pain, we all feel happiness, we all feel sorrow, we all feel joy. And so we have to love one another, truly, deep down, and be there for each other like this group is. And we need to, from the inside out, we need to make that change. So from the inside of here, out to the real world, that's how real change is made. So once again, I want to just do a little bit of a brief introduction. I'm Coach Matt. I founded Psycosmos, which is a combination of the words psyche and cosmos together. It's aligning your human body and your human mind with the higher frequencies, the higher energies of reality. We're going to get into some really interesting information here, but first, just a little bit of background. I'm a professional certified life coach, and I've written a number of books. The book on the right-hand side with all the weird, cool-looking symbols, that is 800 pages. That's my magnum opus, I guess you could call it. We also have like some ebooks and stuff that are available on the website as well. And we got a smaller little introduction version. But really what I wanted to do with this information is just kind of blast it out to the public as best as I could, because I was seeing so much heartache, so much anger, and rage and sadness in the world. And when we had this pandemic happen, I'm going to get into me in a second. When we had this pandemic happen, this massive shift occurred because we saw the news outlets, we saw the banks, we saw everything was changing. And you had so many people who fell into the category of believing into the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, the anger, the resentment, the rage, the sadness. People's families were dying. There were people who were perishing and passing away. And so many people went down in their consciousness. But see, the world has to be balanced in some way. So when you have a bunch of people go down, there's going to be a select few that go up. And that's going to be everybody in this room right now. And that's where all of you have culminated into this group that we see here. Because that's the true beauty of humanity. So I'll give you a little bit of background about who I am. I grew up really financially destitute. So I'm 30 years old. I was born in 1994. And my parents were the greatest teachers I've ever had. My dad constantly was struggling with jobs. He was an alcoholic. My mother was pretty mentally abusive. My dad was pretty physically abusive. And my mom eventually would pass away from being addicted to oxycodone. So this was a really harsh upbringing that I had in my own paradigm, because I was a little kid. And I lived through 9/11 when I was about 7 years old. World changed a little bit after that. Then we had the financial crash in 2007, 2008. Had to live through that. And there was a lot of negative emotions. We're going to talk about emotions today too. But there was a lot of negative emotions. There was a lot of uncertainty for me as a child. Going into this new world, this new age of technology, I had no idea what I was doing as a kid. And one of the things that I always say is my parents are the greatest teachers I ever had. They were the greatest teachers I ever had. They taught me what not to be. And oftentimes, seeing a lot of people nod their heads, oftentimes we have those teachers in our lives for a reason. Because in order for us to be the best versions of ourselves, to be the best people that we can, we have to have those teachers. The light shines brightest in the darkness. And so sometimes in life there is some darkness that occurs so that we can blast through it and shine the light. We can be the light ourselves. So ever since I was about 17, I've been on my own. I was working 2 jobs. My mom was addicted to pills. And taking care of her sometimes, it was horrific. I mean, there were some days where I'd walk in from school and I had to go to work right afterwards. I had 2 jobs. And she'd just be passed out on the floor, and you'd have to help her up, get her back to where she was. And no matter what you did, you can't beg people to change, right? You can't make people change. You can't force them. So they got to make their own decisions. When I was 18, I put myself through college, which was a pretty tough experience. I had to file all the paperwork myself and everything like that. So juggling 2 jobs with schoolwork and a mom that was on pills. And my dad had already walked out of my life by this point, so there was no father figure at that point in my life. It was a really intense experience, but I suffered a lot of depression as a kid because it was a very common thing, back in those days, 10 years ago. It was very, very common. And I was also very spiritual, but very, I guess you could say, agnostic. What's funny is agnostic, it's a really funny word. Like anti-gnostic, gnosis, to know. So what we're going to get into is some etymology, which is the root study of words today. But I was pretty agnostic. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what my place in the world was. I knew that there was a God. I just didn't really connect with what was going on in my local churches, which, it's not a dig on anybody. I'm not here to change anybody's spirituality at all. I'm just here to get people to think. Free the dome. Free your dominion. Freedom. That's exactly what we're all wearing. I actually got the freedom shirt right here. And by the way, it's really comfortable. So when I finally decided that I was going to leave home and I was going to have to, face the potentiality that my mom was probably going to pass away and I wasn't going to really have a relationship with her after that because there was no way she was changing. She was too stubborn, which is probably where I get it from. But she and I had kind of a bit of a falling out. It wasn't really that bad. But I left, and I said, you know what, I'm going to find my own spiritual journey. I'm going to figure out my own spirituality. So I started reading the Bible at 17. And by the time I was just about to turn 19, I had read the entire Bible from front to back. The entire Bible. Every single passage, every single verse. I couldn't quote it now. I do, and I will later, but I couldn't quote the whole thing now because it's a very intense book. But I really wanted to dive deep into my spirituality, and I knew there was something deeper behind this. So I put myself through college. I tried to go to church whenever I could. I still wasn't feeling those answers like I was supposed to be getting. But I would pray. I would pray a lot, and I would try to connect with God in my own way.